7, 8, 9. Kristen's going to be late, but she's on the way, and she is listening, is what she told me. First, welcome. We have a couple of our candidates here. We originally had 3, but we're down to 2. So we'll have 2 we'll be talking to today. A few details about tonight's meeting. We're going till 9, not 8:15.
Yes.
Tonight we're going to be interviewing interested parties for the open Bristol seat, and I shared the original 3 emails, but we only have 2 because 1 pulled out this morning. But I think we should still take about 15 minutes to talk to the 2 we have here, and invite them to stay. I'm not sure, is there a rep from the Bristol Select Board here? No.
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Darla's here.
Yeah, Darla. Okay,
And Ian is here as well.
Okay.
great. So we had a procedure lined out, or that we spelled out, but when we had 3 candidates, we decided we did not have time to go through 16 questions with 3 people. So Krista themed them together, and I sent the 3 questions out to the people who we're going to be talking to, so they have them, and I sent it's going to be, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, experience, and your interest in serving on the board. What skills or traits will allow you to contribute to effective operations of the board as a whole? And what do you see as the major issues facing our school district? And then any questions they have for us. So that they all got those. And after we've heard from everyone, we'll take a little time to speak to the traits we think are valuable in a school board member, rather than campaigning for an individual. In order to be respectful to the candidates, each other will we'll have paper ballots, and we'll write the name on the ballot and turn them in, just so that we'll do our voting that way tonight. We'll also hear from the Bristol Select Board members and their thoughts, because according to the new law, we must do this in consultation with them. So we'll hear from them after we have a chance to talk a little bit. We'll see what they have to say, and then we'll go to voting. As a board, we already agreed to abide by Robert's Rules of Order, and we regularly practice approving items by a majority of the vote. So a majority of the vote will choose the person to fill the open seat tonight. And then after that, we can administer the oath of office and continue on with the newly appointed member joining us at the table. Then we're going to take a 30-minute tour of Mount Abraham. And if you're here for a public member, you can tag along and hear it, but we're going to try to stick pretty close to our times tonight because we have a lot to do. Then during the discussion item, I think I'm going to wait till we get a little closer to that to let us get moving, kind of thing, and I'll explain when we get back from the tour how we're going to proceed through the next steps. So at this time, is there any public comment? Yes, Herb?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me, or should I use the microphone?
The microphones have to stay where they are, I think, so you're just gonna have to speak up.
Okay, I'll speak up.
There we go.
Herb Olson from Starksboro. And I know you have a lot on your agenda tonight, and including a discussion around some issues that are pretty important to me, and I think the town of Starksboro, in terms of whether or not Starksboro is going to have an ability to determine whether their local school is closed, repurposed, whatever. And I believe the select board has sent a letter to everybody. I'm not sure if everybody, I think it just came yesterday, so I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read it. But I think it's important the select board has been hearing from lots of folks, so, they speak with a little better voice than, Nancy and I have been able to speak over the months, in terms of, what they're hoping to see. And I think they, if you haven't read it, they made pretty clear that, they very much wanted an assurance from the board that their town would have the ability to vote on whether this Robinson School, their dear Robinson School, stayed open or, was repurposed or something. Basically whether the kids would be able to go to the elementary school. And the other key point I think they mentioned was, feeling a little backed into the corner with the confluence of the board's facilities process and the merger study committee, and wondering whether, their options might be foreclosed if these things all come together, on March town meeting day, and they're exploring, withdrawal. They're not, nobody's made. The last thing, I will just speak for myself, the last thing I want is to lead an effort to withdraw. But the primary goal is to try to make sure we have a vote in town on whether or not the school's going to stay open. Now, note, we're not saying you got to keep the school open no matter what. That's not what I think the select board is saying, and that's not what I'm saying. It's, give us a right. And I know there are legal opinions all over the place, but just give us a right. And I think it would be a positive thing for the board to do. I think that it would help to eliminate a lot of tension that's built up over the past, I don't know how many months, between, the district board community, whatever. It's hard to sort of separate all the different pieces. But there has been a lot of tension that's built up. If you gave them assurance, I think a lot of that would go away, and you might have a better opportunity to honestly talk about, so what should we be doing? And without the tension that's involved in, well, maybe our school's going to close. We got power plays. We got this. Who knows? We don't really know. So I think it would be a positive move for the board to give towns that assurance, and I urge you to do so. I know you have a discussion item around a lot of that stuff, so it doesn't look like any action is going to be taken, but I would encourage an action item on that type of assurance that the select board of Starksboro requested in the near future. Thank you.
Yes. Can you just give our name for the minute taker?
Yes,
Your name to go.
so my name is Marguerite Gregory, and I'm from Starksboro. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I am concerned about many different aspects of what's happening lately, but I want to speak to one in particular. Ever since Act 46 was approved, I've been worried about what would happen when control is less and less at the local level, but more and more at a level that's further removed from the children and from the teachers. And it seems to me that with this push for the merger, without, from what I understand, there doesn't seem to be time for the various proposals to be well assessed. And I know the teachers, the principals have been brought in. I don't know how much we're even going to hear from the community of teachers who are with the children. And each community, the children are a little different. So when we talk about equity, sure, we want a good education for all the children, but it's not necessarily going to look the same. And I'm concerned that that's kind of what seems to happen when the decision-making is further removed from the children. That there are models that seem to work, but they, across the board, but they may not work for the individual community. Starksville has a very well-functioning school with unique needs. And I don't see the needs of the school being met when the decision-making is removed. So I ask that the proposals be taken really, considered very carefully and in good faith before the merger is what's on.
John, I'm sorry, I missed the point. Can I come back for one? So the letter, I think it's been sent out from the Starksville Select Board, it's been sent out to the board, so I think you have it. But what I would request, and it's up to you, obviously, I would request that that letter be entered into the minutes of this meeting with a link to it so that people will know that it's on the table when you have this, your discussion. I hope you can do that. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I have a question. Can I make a public comment virtually? Okay. Are you able to hear me okay? Yeah. So my name is Elizabeth Marr. I am a teacher at Robinson and Lincoln School. I'm a special educator. I live in Bristol. Another hat I wear is that I am a co-president of the Mount Abraham Education Association. And the comment I wanted to make is that I'm going into my 4th year in this role. And a conversation that we've had, and when I say we, I mean our leadership team with Patrick a number of times is how could we, what could be an avenue for our association to have communication in a somewhat regular way with the board. So in a productive conversation. And so I just wanted to make that comment and ask that be thought about and considered if there was an avenue for that to happen, because I just, the way things are set up at this time, we don't really have that. And we feel like that would be productive. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Any other comment? All right, so let's move on down to our a discussion to meet with our potential candidates.
Order is the consent agenda. We've done the consent agenda.
Oh, you're right. Thank you for noticing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, which contains the minutes from the 8/24 meeting? Andrew?
Second, Krista.
Krista? All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Now, moving down to our discussion item, interview new board member candidates. So we're going to start with Aaron.
So I realize this is a public meeting, but we should probably consider seeing if the candidates voluntarily might leave the room while the other one is talking so that there's no crossfeed, if you will. Or maybe we should as a board talk about if that's even desirable.
What are the board's thoughts? Comments from the board members?
I think I went through this once before and I sat in the same room as the other person. I didn't really have an issue with it myself.
That's been my experience in the past. Just I remember just on the Lincoln school board, people, they just sat together and
Yep.
gave their pitch. So
You live with that, Kevin?
If that's what the board wants, I'm okay.
Okay. By you, Liz. All right. we hate to put you in a hot seat, but if you want to grab the chair at the end of the table, Aaron, and we'll start with you. So. So I'll take a minute and introduce yourself and,
Like start with question one.
well, just tell us a little about yourself.
Okay. Erin Gibner, for any of those who don't know me. I live in Bristol. I have two little girls that also are in this district, a second grader at the elementary school and a preschooler. I grew up in New Haven. I went through Beaman Elementary School and then Mount Abraham. Went out to college and came back. There I am.
So just so you know who you're talking to, we'll start over there right next to you is Brad. So Brad.
Dave Sharp,
I'm Rob Backlund.
Sandy Lee.
Kevin Hansen, Bristol.
Steve Bernie Starkville.
Ariella Pearl.
Ingeborg.
Krista Serena.
And Liz Sarah. John Griswold. And here we have.
I'm Shannon, not just sitting here for the tour.
And you happen to be the principal on that.
And I happen
All right, so let's go on to question one. Tell us a little about yourself, your background, experience, and why you're interested in serving on the board.
Sure. As mentioned, I'm a full-time working mother of two, and I have a vested interest in my community. I serve on the library board here in town. I coach soccer for the elementary school. I volunteer when I can, and I just try to make my community feel special. I like that about Bristol and about our surrounding towns, is that each one feels special. I'm a behavior specialist by trade, so I work in the mental health field. I deal with people who have trauma, regulation issues, and I focus on development, especially in the realm of early childhood. And I'm currently seeking my PhD. I'm a PhD candidate for infant and early childhood development with a specialization in trauma. Beyond my past experiences of having been a student who went through this district, I have an interest of serving on the school board from the perspective of mental health, community stability, and ensuring that we're making decisions that support both of those things.
How about skills, traits that will allow you to contribute to the effective operations of the board as a whole?
So I really appreciate organization, responsiveness, open and honest communication, and instilling a sense of agency within our communities and with our board to make hard decisions. I'm an effective listener, a critical thinker, a person who values discourse, and I'm full of grit. I know that decision making isn't an easy process. I know it's not an emotion-free process, but with my work experience, my experience of going through this district, my expertise in the fields of mental health and development, and my focus on making sure we're organized, we're disciplined, and we're responsive, I think I'll make a valuable addition to the board.
Right, and then our final question is, what do you see as the major issues facing our school district?
So that's a really big question, and I had to think about it a lot because it's different for everybody. Everybody I talk to has a different idea, as I do, but certainly finances, the threat of a shift from status quo, pandemic response, curriculum issues, student services, the term of equity, and the functionality of that within our schools, and then somehow saving our grand sense of community are all important and equally as valuable when we're making decisions on the board. We're a big district, we're diverse, we have different interests, we all have different needs, we have different groups in our communities, and we all have different ideas. And that's a big strength, to have all that diversity to draw from when making decisions. And I'm confident that this board, whether or not I serve on it, will be a critical component of making meaningful change.
Do you have any questions for us? And I'm going to open it up to let board members chime in if there's something you want to share or answer. Go ahead.
I do not have any questions at this point in time.
Board members have any other questions?
Do you like to set your 4-hour meeting?
That's my day job, so yeah.
All right, Krista.
I'm wondering what you think might be most challenging for you in your first year as a board member.
I think you always run to catch up when you join any big forum. And so certainly making sure that I'm adept in not only what the board's going through now, but how you guys govern yourselves, the laws and the regulations. So that's just, the first hurdle of anything, is hitting the ground running. So I think that's probably my biggest nervous energy right now.
And Rob, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, my question is sort of regarding your background and stuff like that. The past year, we've heard, at least if you listen to the governor and Secretary Jean French, continue to say that, our kids are not doing well, our kids are not doing well. So how can our school district be a vehicle, or what way do you see the school district can be a vehicle to help our kids, get back on track? So that mantra does not have to be repeated in the future.
So that's also a big question, but I think we're focusing so much on greater academia instead of catering to what our community values. Some communities might value dairy farming. Some communities might value metalwork or lumber mills, or, where blue collar work has become sort of the resurgence of things, and certainly in Vermont. Not many of my personal classmates that I graduated high school with came back because you can't get the same high level jobs here as you can in Connecticut and New York and, anybody anywhere but here. So I think we have to focus on our curriculum, and our focus on kids' mental health has to really be tailored to what is the important parts of the community that people and it doesn't have to be, totally switch gears and make sure we're only focusing on that, but making sure we have that sort of span. And we have segments of that, but I think that's where education is headed.
Any other questions, board members? Well, thanks for going first. So Bill, we'll have you come up.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Few of you know me. Most of you probably don't, or if you do, don't know a lot about me. Obviously, from my voice, Kevin's heard me say before, I ain't from around here. I do, however, love Bristol. I've been here since 2007. My wife and I were looking for a place midway between Franklin County and Rutland from a previous position that I held, and I drove into town and saw the prayer rock and called her immediately and said, I found a place. All we have to do now is find a home. So we did that. I grew up the son of a school teacher for 38 years in rural Alabama school systems. I heard the problems that the schools had in the 70s and the 80s and in the early 90s. And they sound very similar to the ones we have today. I went to Auburn University, graduated business administration, went to work for the railroad. My background is one of problem solving and management of normal situations all the way to crisis situations, ranging from operations of a 100 train a day facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee with 1,200 employees, to the safety program of the eastern half of the United States for the railroad company that owned the New England Central Railroad. When that sold to a foreign investment group, I went back to the family business of insurance and financial solutions, where I began to work on people's individual and personal instances and crises to try to plan for the future. I moved from that to automobile financing, and now I work in a credit union where I examine people's personal and monetary information in order to make decisions on loans, anywhere from $5,000 to $150,000 on vehicles, campers, things like that. All the way through the course of my career, I've practiced the ability to disseminate information, to pick out important facts, to focus on things that would help make a good decision for the organization or for the member as it is now at the credit union. And I believe that those skills that I've been practicing for the last 30 years or so have led me to a place where I can be very effective here on the school board. Not the least of which is some things that I've taken on in the last couple of years as assistant scoutmaster of the troop here in Bristol. We talk about the children of the schools. Well, the children of the schools are the ones that I see in scouts. And I see scouts that are very fortunate. I see scouts that have broken homes. None of them are equal, but they all have an equity base at our troop. Each one of them is an individual and each one has to be approached differently, but the outcome for most of them is to get to an Eagle Scout. And our job as leaders is to disseminate that information that they give us and to help them on that path, their individual path that gets them where they're going to go and their goals. So again, another thing, a volunteer thing that gets me to where I believe I'd be a very effective member of the board.
You wrapped up a bunch of the questions all in one.
On one try.
Do you have any questions for us?
Down, I've got kind of a comment. I know the board works very hard. I know that you meet very hard. I know that in all the efforts that I've made throughout the course of my career and volunteer life, we have a much more effective way of working together when we pay attention to each other, when we listen to each other, when we focus on what's being said, and not to cast a damper on the meeting. But when my friend here was speaking about it very passionately about his school in Starksboro, I looked around, I saw a lot of people on their phones, on their devices. It didn't seem to me that they were paying a lot of attention to the concern. One of the things that I hold dear is the ability to listen, to focus, and to respond, not always positively, not always in a way that makes the person happy, but always in a way to make them know that they were heard and that their concerns were considered. Anything else?
Anyone else have any questions?
I'll ask you the same question, Bill, that I asked Aaron, which is, what do you think is going to be your greatest challenge if you were to join the board at this point?
Board has a big job. It's one that certainly isn't taken lightly. There's a lot of difficult decisions to be made in the very near future. That's one of the things I've always been best at, but the thing that I would deem as the most difficult is learning each of you as members of the board, learning how you like to work with others and finding a way for us to coalesce and build a bridge to working together, working toward that common goal and making things happen for the benefit of the children, first and foremost, and for the surrounding towns and the people that live there as well.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, that was easy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So now we'll take a few minutes to kind of gather ourselves together and, think about what traits that we value in a board member. Oh, yeah, I was going to let us do a couple of minutes and then I was going to check in with them because they met last night and so they had a big discussion. Would you rather hear from them first? Sure. So Darla or Ian, I don't know.
We're both here. I'm questioning, so how do you usually handle this? Is it a public discussion? Is it executive session discussion in terms of the two candidates? Do you speak frankly in terms of out front of with both of them? How would you normally handle this?
I've asked board members to focus on the traits they think are valuable for the board rather than to be talking specifically about the individual.
Okay.
I took a couple of notes while both of our candidates were speaking, and I appreciated when Erin spoke. My notes that I took are, she mentioned herself being a critical thinker. She mentioned, her background in mental health and development. I think those are both really important traits for board members. And the fact that she, has gone through this system and been a student with at Mount Abe, I think is really important, and that she has children who will be in our school system as well, I think is another important trait. For Bill, the things that I found important with him were the problem solving pieces, the crisis management. I can see where those would be very important for a board, and the focus on facts I appreciated, and the volunteer piece that he's done for our community and made his space that way, and the dedication that he's brought to that role. Those are the parts that came to mind as important for me in listening to both of them speak.
Thanks, Darla. Ian?
I'd say a lot of very similar, a lot of overlap with Darla. I agree, like both. I mean, in terms of if you're not looking at the two candidates, but in terms of what's important, like community focus, obviously, knowing your community, knowing the five-town, knowing your own town, and what you do in that. The education piece, obviously, if you have education that's focused within and towards what the board that you're trying to serve on, that's always very handy. It's nice to see the confidence in terms of board members approaching. I thought it was interesting that Bill criticized the board. I thought that was a bold move, but it's also good you want to be able to see that too. You don't want to have people who aren't able to speak out and speak freely in terms of discussion. So I thought that's a good trait to have. So yeah.
All right. Thank you both. So, board members, is there a trait that you found valuable that you heard about that you want to share with everybody, or do you just want to vote?
I'd like to just echo, I think the idea of community service and giving back is an important trait for any member of the board. So I commend both of the candidates.
I just want to say it's great that Bill and Eric step forward. Sometimes we have 0 people. If we're lucky, we have 1. So it's wonderful. And I think it's really tricky because, well, it's for a few months, right? But it's really up to the people of Bristol, right? And so this is kind of but thank you so much, because that might be a record, 2 people in the last 10 years. I'm completely serious. So thank you. And you both sound absolutely great. Wow.
Yeah, I would say Bristol's fortunate to have what I think are 2 really nice candidates.
Yeah, I would echo that, especially paying attention lately. We're sort of surrounded by hornets nest, not even just in one, a little bit. So the fact that we actually have 3 names with 2 folks step forward, I'm super appreciative. It makes me proud of being part of the five-town community. Step into this.
Okay. You'll have something to write with? Yeah. Yep, you're writing down your vote. question?
I did, because we were sort of chatting over here and I realized it's probably worth going ahead and expressing, just sort of the procedural piece, the board gets to decide and we vote on it. And I think you said it's in consultation with Bristol. And I'm just trying to figure out what that means. Like, did the select board feel they wanted to give more input in terms of, I guess I just want to respect that this is the town of Bristol's
We can ask them.
representative.
They met last
Yeah,
night and maybe they'll tell us
I
some
don't
of
know.
their discussion from last night.
Sure.
Darla or Ian?
The discussion last night was just with regard to the interviews tonight. Some of us had familiarity with the candidates, some did not. We didn't discuss anything in executive session just because we felt we needed to be part of the interview process to be able to make comments on that, as opposed to commenting outside of that. So really, I think it's, this is a new way that you're doing it, a new way that we're all doing it, really. So we're sort of learning and going along with how you're doing it.
In the past, they made the decision and they sent the person to us. The law changed in 2020, and now it outlines in consultation with the select board, but we do the appointing to refill the remainder of the term. And the individual has to run for, I think the seat was up to run again for re-election in March anyway, so it's just to get us to March, the next scheduled election. Fred.
It doesn't seem to me that if we all just write a name on a piece of paper and we select the individual that way, without having any actual consultation with the select board, it doesn't seem to be the way I would interpret the law to intent. I mean, because there's no consultation. I mean, they're sort of, they had Ian and Darla and the other Bristol Select Board members had a discussion about this process, but that's not in consultation with the school board. It would seem to me that, one idea would be just to go into some sort of executive session, outside, with the candidates not in the room, and have a frank discussion between the board and the select board to kind of come to some decision. I mean,
Right. Dave.
so it is incredibly vague, whatever the heck consultation means. It's extraordinarily vague. We didn't define it going into it, but in the future, we might define what our notion of consultation means. Because I think, there are a myriad of ways of consulting with the select board. One idea would be to have the select board, take the list of names and present them to us with their recommendations. And then we would deal with that. We wouldn't have to choose who they sent to us. But at least it would be a more formal consultation than what we just went through. I don't know. I think we live with what we've got now, and if we have a vacancy the next time, it would be wise for us to just determine as a board what we believe consultation means.
Kristen.
I think in the 10 years I've been on the board, that we've only ever had one person, so we haven't had to deal with this ever. And I don't feel personally comfortable taking a vote for the people of Bristol, since I'm a Moncton resident. I really don't. And I mean, could the select board go back and
In the law, it says this is the school board appointment.
right, but we could still take their recommendation and go with that. I just don't feel comfortable. And we're talking about local control and everyone's, all up in arms about that. I mean, me voting on something that someone's going to represent Bristol, I don't feel comfortable with that.
I agree.
Krista.
I think the only problem I see is with us going by a select board recommendation is I'm not sure the select board feels equipped to choose the candidate for the board, you know, they would probably maybe be more equipped to choose the candidate for their board. But not, I just wonder if, I like the consultation idea, but for them to be the one to make the recommendation that we then act upon seems a little tricky also. Because if I were a select board member, I'd be saying, I don't know, you know, I don't know what you're looking for in a candidate. And so I think it is tricky. This is not a great process right now. But I'm not sure totally advocating to the select board. I think that's probably why the law changed a bit, is to acknowledge that piece, but I don't know. But I wonder if we could take a straw poll to just see if people are okay with moving forward, or if enough people feel like we should halt and figure out a different way.
Well, I think we need to give Bristol a person on the board. So I don't think we should wait past today, because there's so much important stuff going on. So I don't know. It's another problem we have that doesn't have a clear answer.
Yeah.
Lovely,
Yeah.
but seems to be going around.
Something that is-
Sandy.
I'm leaning more towards, I feel like consultation is more than just, you know, observations. I mean, I appreciate the observations. It's sort of strange having that here in this open meeting. So I think people are trying to be very respectful to the candidates and the discussion, which I totally appreciate. I think that's great. But I also think the recommendation avenue is what I was thinking as well. It's not unusual for the town who's familiar with sort of the select board, is they've been elected, they know sort of the pulse of their community. And if they make a recommendation, ultimately the board can not follow the recommendation or choose to follow it based on what we think overall is needed as a school board member. But it does help to give the school board some guidance on the traits that they felt were important, and what ultimately between all of those select board members, they came to recommendation. It reminds me of when you have a like state's attorney candidate, when someone leaves, there's a committee that makes a proposal, and then people then select from that. It's not mandatory. We're not taking out like what was our responsibility, because we're still voting on it, but we actually have information. So I think straw poll makes sense, but I'm definitely leaning towards, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I want to respect the towns, if they have one and they would like to present one, you know, a recommendation.
Liz, and then Rob. Liz. For a moment, for just a moment, I put my hand up because I was like, well, just the Bristol people can vote for the Bristol person then. But that's not what we're doing here. That's not what we're doing at all. So I think we can all vote and pick a person. And then I know I'm running in March, so like you guys are welcome to run against me, you know, like there'll be some, you know, it'll be in just a little while. So like, I don't know. I just feel like we can do this and get somebody at the table and then continue the conversation for sure, knowing that people are interested and want to be a part of the work. So that's a plus to me. Rob.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards what Kristen's feeling and Brad. I mean, the board possibly will be making some really big decisions before next town meeting day, possibly. And I honestly don't feel that it's my role to vote on who represents the town of Bristol personally. I understand that's the law, and I'm on a board, so maybe I have to make big decisions, but just the whole idea of the process, it's sort of like the mess we're already in, right? Like people are worried about the board taking their right away in their town to vote for their school. And I just don't feel like my seat does not provide me that authority to choose who represents the town of Bristol, a town I do not live in. So that's just my feeling on it. I'd love to hear more from the Bristol Select Board. I don't have a great pulse of the community down here quite yet.
Steve.
Well, I do think it's kind of strange that if it wasn't for the fact that we needed an interim representative, these folks would be making their case to the select board and to the people of Bristol. They wouldn't be making their case to us. So simply the fact that we need to fill an interim seat. The fact that suddenly that scenario switches to us making the decision rather than the select board does seem rather bizarre. I realize there's not anything anybody here made. This isn't, it's out of our hands to some extent, but I also think that we don't necessarily need to try to reinvent it tonight, but I do think another discussion about it to maybe throw some more weight back in the other direction might be helpful in the future.
Given the level of concern is what the wishes of this board to ask the Bristol Select Board for a recommendation. Is that what I'm hearing? I would think we want to have a consultation with the board, I mean, with the select board. That's what the law says.
May I offer a suggestion as a select board member? So my thought is, and I'm sorry, I don't remember everyone's name, but the idea was brought up to have an executive session. So Ian and I were appointed by the board to come and be the representative this evening. I don't fully see that you need the full board to make this recommendation. We've had access to materials about the two candidates that were also available to you. We have heard the interview and the statements made by the two candidates. I think if you'd like more of a consultation, we could do that in a short executive session with all of you tonight. Thereby we'd have a back and forth, which would be more of a conversation / consultation, and we could remedy this evening. And then if you want to make a change to how this happens going forward, you could do that. But it sounds like you have important issues coming up that Bristol should have another voice in. I can't fix the part about I don't have a suggestion rather about folks who are not Bristol folks if you don't feel comfortable voting. And I wonder if one piece might be if you chose to abstain from voting. I don't know if that's a possibility. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just putting that out there. Those are the thoughts that come to my head.
I think the concern about being a non-Bristol resident is not so much, I have no problem voting for one of the candidates if there's some consultation with the select board in Bristol. I think, what Rob was getting at is if there's no consultation, we have no input from the Bristol Select Board, then it does seem a little odd that a non-Bristol resident would be voting for someone to represent the town of Bristol on the board.
Okay, so I need some answers to questions because I don't believe we have a reason to go into executive session under the law. So what I might suggest, since we have people waiting to take the tour, that you all go on the tour. I will hang back and try and figure out what steps we can take. And by the time you get back, I hope to have an answer. So let's just pause right here. We're not going to vote. Sorry, a little longer. And let me get some answers because I don't know how to get us there right now. All right. Thanks everybody for taking the tour and being flexible. Having done a little research, there is a Title I VSA 313A3 that would allow us to go into executive session regarding the appointment of a public officer. So we have a way to get into executive session. So what we can do is we can make a motion to go into executive session. We can invite Ian and Darla. And then once we're into executive session, we can get up and go into the small cafeteria so that this meeting can just, again, wait, pause, and then we can have our discussion and come back and take our action. Or not take our action. Our action may be no action.
How did Darla and Ian join us over there?
We're working on that right now. We're going to try and get some contact for them.
Can you use breakout rooms for this Zoom meeting?
I don't know.
Either that or set up a new Zoom meeting.
Just set up another Zoom. I can set. sorry. We're just trying to see how they can contact us.
They have their phone.
Yeah, they're just doing it right now.
So you have that.
I mean, I'm also here too.
Yeah.
Hi.
Ian.
Hey, Ian, we're thinking it's easiest if you and Darla each FaceTime us. So I would have you FaceTime me and Darla would FaceTime Don. That, I know, it's so 2020. 2020. I mean, I suppose we could try to set up another Zoom link. But we'll all be in one location. And so you guys are the only two zooming in.
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you're able to take a laptop into that location, you could just have us create a Zoom, and then we could just both join that. All we need is the link versus calling in 2 different phones, which might cause problem with audio, things like that.
Okay,
All right.
that's awesome.
I will send you and Darla the link.
Okay, perfect.
Email it to you both, okay?
Okay, that's great.
All right, is everybody, you all heard what's gonna happen?
So do we need a motion?
Yes, we need a motion under title 1 DSA 313A3, the appointment of a public official, a public officer to go into executive session and invite Ian and Darla.
So moved.
Okay, so that's Steve, yep, and Andrew. All those in favor of going into executive session for the stated purpose? 1 DSA 313A3, appointment of a public officer, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and it's 7:37. Okay, so board members, if you also will hop up and you'll walk over to the small cafeteria, and we will be back. All right, so now we're having had our consultation. Is everyone prepared to vote at this point?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so take a minute to jot down your vote and then pass it around, or I'll come get it, I guess. And because it's paper ballot, I get to vote. That doesn't happen. All right.
You want me to count?
One for Aaron. Another for Aaron. Bill. Aaron. Bill. All right. We have 10 in favor of Aaron and 2 for Bill Mount. So our next action is to appoint Aaron, as she's the majority, to fill the position. Sandy.
I wanted to thank you both for coming out, because it's wonderful to volunteers and who like a step to take part.
Thank you both.
I won't take any more of your time. Thank you very much. I'll see you in March.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Oh, no, we need an oath.
Oh.
Tell you what, Krista, why don't you start on the Nate thing and we'll work out the oath?
Patrick, are you able to just pull that up and share? Okay.
Let me see if I can find it.
Should I start talking? Yes, okay. All right, so we wanted to update everybody on where we're at with the Nate Levinson process. So if folks recall, Don and Patrick and I have been meeting with their team outside of these meetings and coming back with updates. And I shared an update at the Community Engagement Committee meeting, specifically focused on the Community Input Committee. But it seemed like that would be helpful to bring to the full group and to maybe share a little bit more so that we're all on the same page and know what's going on, because I can appreciate how easy it is to feel like you're missing key pieces of what's happening. So this is just a review of the timeline that we initially set out in our work with Nate and his team. Also, I think it's helpful for us to just have that context that we constantly are being refreshed with to sort of remember how we got here. And Nate and his team are formally called K-12 New Solutions. And I think I referred to them throughout as the review team. So Patrick, if you could just show the next slide. And so for the folks that are not in person, this will be linked after the meeting to the minutes. But I'm pretty visual, so I thought it'd be helpful for other people to see it this way as well. Sort of, we'll just talk through. So just as a reminder of how we got to this work with Nate, we had a call for community proposals, and as a board, we came up with 6 broad criteria, and I'll remind us of what those were. You know, as we thought about what will we tell people we're looking for when we seek out these proposals. And so they are improved outcomes for students, alignment with our core educational values, and those were the values that we developed through our work in the fall of 2019 as a community with Sue McCormick. Quality education for students in all 5 towns, financial and legal viability, a long-range plan for the district, and alignment with our strategic plan. And so we did that in March. This call for proposals, we got back 6, and we also had the one that we had gotten from Patrick. And we then had a lot of conversation, if folks can remember, about, okay, how are we going to evaluate these based on these criteria, and do we need help with that? So that's when we started our conversations with Nate and his team to understand what help he might be able to offer to help us develop this process for evaluating proposals. And really our hope was to have a framework and structure that would be comparable, so that the proposals were somewhat apples to apples, if that's possible, fair, unbiased, consistent. And so that was our hope, and that was what Nate presented to us in his scope of work. So we got to him commencing that work in July. So the community proposal deadline was, I think, May 4th, but it took some time for Nate to get his work underway and for us to all agree on that scope of work. And so in July, he and his team met with all of the proposal authors and with Patrick as well on his proposal. And what his purpose for those meetings was to really get a sense of what the proposal authors were thinking, and to then develop a presentation template to summarize all of them for us. He shared that presentation template with the proposal authors. They were invited to offer feedback on that. So then in that work on that common presentation template happened in August. Also part of Nate's scope of work was this recommendation to form a community input committee. And the goal of that committee was to further clarify and define the evaluation criteria that we set out as a board. So it was him and his team's recommendation that that we might benefit from some more clarity and refinement of those criteria. And as you think back to the ones I listed off before, some of them are fairly vague. And so their thinking was that if they had this opportunity, not just Nate and his team, but drawing in people from our community to talk about how they could come up with some refinement of those criteria and bring those to us as a board to say, here's how we think it would make the most sense to evaluate these proposals. And so I think folks have felt that this was moving the goalpost. I think that's unfair from my perspective. I think really the intention is that we're trying to make sure we really understand what's being brought before us. Again, community proposals and Patrick's in a way that we can see clearly and really make sense of. So Nate's recommendation, his team's recommendation was that this committee absolutely include this, all of our building principals, recognizing that they're really trusted community advisors that have an on-the-ground knowledge of what's happening in their schools. And then in addition to that, it would be helpful to have representatives from each of the towns. And so in trying to form a committee that is not too cumbersome and too large, he recommended a couple of people from each town, maybe one or two more from Bristol, because that's a considerably larger population. And that, you know, the idea was that this general idea of what a community input committee might look like would come to us as a board, and we would figure out if there were anything we wanted to add in that scope or work of that committee that we would suggest they consider. So that's what we did at our last meeting. If people remember, we had a discussion about what the committee scope was. It really is pretty narrow. It's solely focused on this evaluation criteria. The committee is not going to evaluate the proposals. They're really just looking at the criteria to help us in that evaluation. So we had a conversation and we talked about the need for those meetings to be open. We talked about how to select people. The recommendation from Nate and one that Patrick and Dawn and I shared was that a lottery seemed like the best way to have an unbiased selection, considering the climate right now in our community. So that seemed to make sense. And so that was how we formed, or how we came up with the invitation to people to apply to that committee and what they would do. So they are going to meet at least twice, probably no more than 4 times, starting at, I think, the end of September. And they will come up with some suggested criteria that Nate will then share with us. And we have the final say on whether or not we adopt all, some, or none of them. Or maybe we would say, you know, there's something missing or something that needs more fine tuning. Those criteria will ultimately be used by the review team to evaluate all of the proposals. So once those criteria are decided upon, the review team is going to go do their work, but they're also in the process of building a financial model. So in addition to the 5 to 7 or so evaluation criteria that the review team and the community input committee come up with, and that the board agrees upon, Nate and his team are going to be developing, and I think have already done some significant work on developing the financial model. And this model will help to evaluate the financial feasibility of the different proposals. What it's going to be designed to do, which I think is incredibly helpful for us, is to build in the ability to take a number of different variables and change them or turn them on and off. So for example, you know, one is, what if health benefit costs rise by 3%, 5%, 15%? This model will allow us to plug in the different scenarios. What if enrollment declines, hold steady, or increases? Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Will we own that?
Well, that was what I was thinking, because I thought that is amazing for the future as well. You know, and I recall so many conversations we have with Patrick, and you do present to us that sort of, you know, the variety of possible budgets, but to be able to like plug and play different variables seems super handy. So I hope so, and I would think so. A couple of other variables were what if the spending threshold is kept or eliminated? What if tuition rates to neighboring high schools are X, Y, or Z? What if one of the towns in our district were to successfully withdraw? What I think the beauty of this is that it really captures so many of the ambiguities about which we cannot seem to find common understanding. And it allows us to play with different versions of that and you know, really include that in our decision-making process, which feels really robust to me and thorough, and a lot more than we as a board could do on our own. And I think, you know, one of the things that I really remember about the retreat, and as we were trying to patch Nate and his team in, you know, but he showed us, if you guys can remember that slide where he said, you know, after meeting with the proposal authors, it was just so clear that there were so many points where we had just a lack of common knowledge and agreement between the board and the community and you know, about some of these different factors. So having this sort of model where we can play around with these options, I think is incredibly helpful and useful.
So Krista, one of the variables you mentioned just now is what if a town leaves the district or not? Of course, Lincoln's voted to do that a long time before it eventually happens.
Yeah.
One of the things though, in their presentation on August 10th that I attended in Lincoln, they projected that 70% of their students would go to high school. They didn't mention middle school. I don't recall what grades they're talking about maintaining in Lincoln, but they did say 70% of their kids would go to Mount A. So that's one number. But what if it's 90% or what if it's 50%? And that's a variable that could dramatically affect all the proposals and what our path looks like going forward.
Yeah, and I think, you know, maybe there's going to be an opportunity to work closely at tweaking of that financial model to address some of those different numbers as well.
Krista, did you say that the committee has been formed?
I think the deadline to express your interest was
The 13th,
Monday.
yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly when people will be notified, but I think their first part of that, your eligibility was your availability to meet on 2 specific dates, one coming up and next week or the week after, end of September, and one early October. So I imagine that'll be decided on, you know, very soon. I guess that I just wanted to add that, so after the review team, you know, will be doing a lot more work in November. But I think they hope to be able to share a draft report with us sometime that month. And that's going to be shared with the board, with building principals, with the members of the community input committee and the proposal authors, all for feedback before a final report is presented. And I think something else that's important for us to remember is that at that point, that's when we're going to want to really think about community input. I remember being really concerned about where was the role for community input in this process. But what I've come to appreciate is that the community input is going to be so much more valuable as some of these key questions are answered. Like the more robust information we can provide, the more valuable the community input will be. And so I really feel good that this is what we're building up to, is to say to folks, like, this is a full picture, and now let's have a really good conversation about it. So, yeah, so I just wanted to share that update, and I don't know if there's any other questions. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I have a quick question. Maybe I should know this. I apologize. Yes. But when the review team met with the proposal authors, did that include any kind of a process to allow the proposal authors and Patrick, I guess, to sort of amend what was originally submitted?
Yes, I believe so. And maybe you can speak to that specifically, Patrick, but I think there was like a 2-step process with them before. So then what Nate ultimately did was create a summary of their proposal, but I believe there was a little back and forth of like, have I understood you correctly? And is there anything you want?
I just envision a scenario where, you know, a proposal team meets with Nate and his team, and and there's something in their proposal that just doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
everybody agrees, so why keep it in the proposal?
Right. And I think also later on in the process,
Yes.
there is a place where I believe it's gonna happen within that draft report timeframe where, you know, Nate isn't contracted with us to then engage a full another round with proposal authors, but he, I think, is totally willing and able to provide additional feedback to say, hey, this would make it even, this makes a little more sense, or would you, you know, you might consider this.
My recollection was that he would review their proposal and if they so desired, do some limited collaborative process with them. He wouldn't necessarily spend a lot of time doing that. I didn't get the impression, or it would not, if they didn't want, the proposers didn't want to do it, then it's fine. But he, I think through that whole process, my recollection, as we talked about, his proposal was to do that. To some degree.
Yeah. Dave.
Krista, with regard to what might be the end proposals that come to us as a board, if I recall correctly, when he met with us, he threw out some ideas. And one that sticks in my mind is that talked about one district, I think in Vermont, that had, one half of the building was like one town school and the other half of the building was the other town school. It was all in the same building, but they each had their separate identity. I don't recall that being in any of the 6 community proposals. Was he going to perhaps inject some of his own ideas or suggest to us that maybe proposal number 3 would work with the one wing, with some notion he has, maybe that one or maybe some other notion.
I don't recall, I mean, that would be a good question for us to ask him, but I'm imagining he has so much experience that he probably couldn't help himself but to offer like, hey, have you considered X, Y, and Z? But I don't know that he would wrap it up in sort of a formal proposal. But what I was going to also say is if there are other questions that folks have that you would like us to bring to Nate and his team when we meet again, that's, I think, helpful.
Well, I wasn't trying to focus on that specific thing, just on the
Yeah, yeah.
general idea. Is he willing or able or interested in
Yeah.
injecting some of his own ideas into these proposals or in addition to these proposals?
I don't have a clear sense of that. I don't know if you do, Don.
I don't, I would have to ask him to really.
But I will say that, I mean, he felt like all of the community proposals has some really compelling aspects in it, and that within that, we might find a solution that we can all. Right.
Yeah, and just one quick question on the, when the review team shares the draft report with us and others and to gather feedback, will that include also if we have like requests for clarifications in each of the proposals, or what is the process for that, if any?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we probably have to figure out what process would make sense. And he hasn't visited with our board in a while. But I think we'll probably have to figure out the best way to have that conversation. Do we have a meeting scheduled with them again in the near term?
I thought they put out some date. No, the dates are still the last one.
Maybe unless you took notes, Don, if people have specific questions that we can try to get answers to. But I think planning for that draft report conversation is one that we should think about how that would be structured.
And that's often, proposal development, evaluation is usually a step toward the end with clarifications and requests of
Yeah.
the authors.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's like what's considered under gather feedback.
Right. Yeah, that's what I asked.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Here.
Is that okay?
You all right?
Sure.
Krista, I'm just curious how the merger study committee process fits in with this review team process. And I know that you might have already answered it, and I feel like I just need a little more information about it, but I keep kind of feeling like it's one of those sort of math questions. If two trains are traveling on the track at, this speed, at what point do they intersect? Because it feels like there's two very important conversations happening. And you've got the review team and the evaluation criteria, and then you've got merger study committee coming up with their own process.
Yeah, and we have a much more clear idea of this process because it's our board consultants' work. But I think in a little bit, when we start talking more about the three places where we want more clarity, merger study committee is one of them. And so we're going to be leaning on our board reps to that committee to help shed some light on that.
I don't see a meeting scheduled for maintenance team.
I don't think so
in the
either.
near
Okay.
future, so.
So we've hopped around. We need to take action. We didn't take any action to appoint Aaron, and I don't have an oath of office, a copy of the oath of office. So what we can do is invite Aaron to sit at the table with us. She wouldn't be able to vote tonight, but she could certainly be a beginning of the conversation, and that we can get that oath of office out tomorrow. But first, we need to take action to appoint her.
Okay. So moved.
Krista.
I'll second.
All those in favor of appointing Aaron Jipner as our Bristol board rep to fill the position to the next election, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we can't take the oath of office because I don't have a copy. I found a copy, but I can't print it. So come on, join us at the table. Like I said, you can certainly participate and just won't be able to vote at this point.
Can it be verbal? Even if that's not right.
I think we've always had to have a paper copy. I mean, I have a copy of my computer.
We're not actually, we have no action.
So
items
the only thing
anyway.
we gotta vote on is to adjourn, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're voting on anything.
So
anyway.
probably be in agreement.
Yeah.
You probably want to listen. Okay. All right, so we can't administer the oath of office, so we'll do that, get that. All right, so Sandy.
Just to follow up on the comment regarding the merger study, I know we don't have it formally in the agenda, but maybe having our board reps on the merger committee be on the agenda to give us updates.
That
At our
is,
meetings.
that is the plan, but we do have a place to talk about it tonight in
Oh, we
order
do.
of the discussion, so.
Okay, great.
That's where we are right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, but it is also included in the updates, Kristen.
Are we gonna have reps do the written thing for the agendas? Because that used to work really well.
Yeah.
And then people could ask questions off of that, and it saved a lot of time. So, I mean, I know you've been talking about that for a while, but if people could actually do that, I think it would.
Yeah.
It's actually nice to have it in front of you too, and you have to be sort of
So,
concise and.
right,
all that
so,
stuff.
so
Just a thought.
engagement and merger study, we're gonna ask for those updates for our regular meeting on the 28th. So you have 2 weeks to do your written updates. If you get them, actually you have 1 week, because in a perfect world, we get it out a week ahead of the meeting. Sarah.
Our merger study committee has a response at the end of the meeting and just bring it back.
Yep, that would be fine. If you on the merger study committee want to decide, take turns writing something up or sharing something, that would be fine. Okay. So the next item is a discussion item around, and the agenda reads seeking common ground and clarity regarding, and they're the 3 points that Krista brought up in the conversations with Nate. Clarity regarding the physical state of Mount Abe, the authority for decision-making, closing versus fundamental change of use versus changing grade configuration. And the third one were the board's interest in forming the merger study committee. So those were 3 that Nate said that suggested. Krista.
Yeah, so that slide that I was talking about earlier, he talked about all the different assumptions and he said, we can work on some of these through our process, but there are some that the board really needs to focus on. So some of them are about the financial modeling, and I think that will cover a lot of those assumptions, but the three that he thought were places where if we could come to some common understanding and provide clarity, that would be really helpful. So that's the three that we were wanting to talk about tonight. Kevin.
So for item 1, physical state of Mount A, I think I read or thought I read somewhere that he actually toured the building. Is that true?
Yeah. Here's Rick.
It wasn't Nate, it was Carla.
Carla.
Okay, and it would be interesting to know what her impression of the building was as we start to talk about.
I think I have those notes in it.
I don't know that she's offered
No.
an impression yet. I suspect that's,
People are having a hard time hearing everyone because the room is so big. If they should speak up, that would be great. I'm just hearing from the public. Here.
Masks don't help.
I know. Sorry.
the question was, do we know what Carla's impression of the building was having visited Mount Abe? And the answer is no, we don't have any sort of official impression from her.
But I think what Nate said is if we could get some clarity around how we feel about it, that would be helpful so that we can sort of start as a group understanding, okay, how do we feel about this and how do we feel about that? So Krista and Patrick and I talked and brainstormed and tried to think about another approach. My last approach wasn't met with a lot of success. So I'm going to ask you this time, whether you understand it or not, to please go ahead with it. Even if you don't understand it, let's just get into it and see what we can do. So we have these 3 topics, and what we're going to do is divide up into 3 groups. And this protocol is called the Jigsaw protocol. And it's a protocol used to help everybody get a bit of a knowledge about a subject quickly or relatively quickly. And then what we're going to do, you're going to get into your group, and each group is going to have a topic, and then we're going to use this, and you're going to consider 2 questions when you get into your group. And the 2 questions are, what's your perception of Nate's concern? And what are the steps the board should take to address these concerns? So each group will become an expert on the topic in 15 minutes. And they will study and discuss in order to be sure they are in agreement or they have a common understanding. And in your group, you will identify a lead expert who will take, their responsibilities will be to take good notes. They will, and they must stick to what the group says and not their own opinion. And they must capture everyone's voice in their notes. And then when you finish that part of the answering those 2 questions, then that group is going to kind of give yourselves all numbers 1 to 4. And then the experts will join a new group, and the next group will be 4 groups of 3. And then the expert's going to share what they learned from their first group with the second group. And then that'll be another 15 minutes. Then we're going to come back and check and see where we all are as a whole group, and maybe take a consensus check to see if we're getting close to some common understanding amongst ourselves, or whether we still got pieces that need more information that we have to go get more and figure out the next steps. So what we'll do is, now that we're all back together, we'll just go around the table once and let everybody share what their takeaway, what they learned from this little bit of time together. So we'll start here at this end and go with Liz.
So I appreciated our facilities group. And I thought that we were really productive and did a good job, because we understand, I think, that the concern probably stems from that one of the last things that we put out was information about why we wanted a renovation. And so that really pointed to the struggles and challenges of our schools, of Mount Abe in particular. And so that what we need now is an update that says, hey, so Sandy found the capital improvement plan that was there. And then we could go down and say, these are the things that have been done. These are the things that have yet to be done. And do another video tour, like intentionally to show all of that work. And that could be really helpful to get everybody on the same page about the state that Mount Abe is in and address those differing opinions. And we also talked about doing a student survey of seeing how they feel about the building now that some changes have happened. So that's good.
All right, Krista, we'll just go around the table so you can go ahead and.
Okay, I mean,
Sure.
I was in the same group as Liz, so I think we had some concrete ideas at the board. I was in the first, originally the Mount Abe group. So I think we have some concrete ideas of things we can do to help provide some clarity around the state of Mount Abe.
Andrew?
Where to begin? So I think I appreciated the clarity that the stuff we're doing with Nate Levinson and then the merger study committee are two separate things that are on their very different timelines, but just to get us information. Our group discussed initially the questions about repurposing grade level configurations and closings. So on one hand, I think we were pretty clear that closing the school, shutting lights off, locking doors is against the Warren Article 46 Articles of Agreement. On the other hand, some retooling grade level configurations based upon what might be educational best practices is something the board empowers Patrick to do to make that happen on a day-to-day basis. And then in the middle is the difficult stuff, what is on the ballot and what wasn't warned on the ballot, and we didn't have enough time for that. So
our merger study committee got to chat, and it was good to actually then regroup and go through. We didn't really get through questions part 2, we'll say, about how to address it, and it was nice to then have a couple of ideas come back from group 1. And some of it being about, some of the misperception is a lot about, I don't want to say the ability, we'll say, or the inability of a merger study committee to suddenly merge and close schools. And also about timing of like the decision making. And so maybe to really advocate to clarify for the timeline, I guess, with the merger study committee, in a positive way. And then also to think about how to communicate what we're doing on the merger study committee. And just giving more information that's pretty clear that there's nothing really going on behind the curtain, that it's a pretty transparent and rather slow process. It's really transparent.
So I was on the Who Has the Authority group with Andrew, and it's I think from not only talking in that group, but then talking with the next group, there's still a lot of ambiguity and head scratching about where the dividing line is and whether or not you can define a wholesale change of use such as an innovation center as being tantamount to closing and therefore falling under the warrant articles, or whether that's part of Article 16 and whether the board has the authority to deal with that or not. So I think it's still fairly unclear. I had made a suggestion that we gain that clarity from the district voters rather than trying to gain it from somebody taking us to court or us making our own decision on that, on whether or not we have the authority or not. But that's just one option. And then I heard some good information on the merger study committee, and also I think the information on the Mount Aid school process sounds sound.
So I was on the merger study committee group as well. I think a few other things that we touched upon that are mystical, maybe, that Sarah alluded to, is the whole 706 process and understanding of how it folds out, that it's would ultimately, if there was a recommendation to merge by the committee, it would have to be voted on by each district, and that seems to get that doesn't seem to get talked about a lot. It's just the merger study committees coming up with this merger plan. There was a discussion about a little bit as well about the fact that a lot of the community proposals generally are focused on the elementary school and not so much on the high school. Matter of fact, there are several proposals that recommend closure of the high school, whereas the merger study committee, and particularly for Jens, is at the point where they're looking to better utilize their high school for additional cost reductions and savings, which is where we are not so much at that point in this district. There was a little discussion about the perpetual unknowns, trying to sort out how people can be comfortable or are comfortable or not comfortable with all the various unknowns, escalation factors, if you will, over time, with whether that'd be beneficial with a merger or not. Unfortunately, as Sarah alluded to, we spent a lot of time talking about the perceptions, and then really started scratching our head a little bit when the bell rang as to what we should be recommending for actions.
Okay. So, yeah, again, what we did, we were more clear that a closing requires a town vote. And then, we need to define what repurposing is. Is it changing grades within a building or doing an innovation center type change? And as Andrew said, we really felt that, at least our group, that the change of grade configurations should be a means situation where the administration or the teachers and everybody decides on that. But is that different from repurposing to create, because it does change the use of the building. So we would need to parse that apart. And then in the secondary discussion, that we could, and whether we did or not, or people agreed to, address the murkiness of repurposing once we defined it, we could say that, oh, that's up to towns to vote on, whether we would want to or not, but that's one action we could take in the future. It's still pretty murky though, so, but I think even parsing apart what repurposing is still between those two things. I think that was it that I want to add.
I was on the physical state of Mount Abe, and I pretty much mirror what both Krista and Liz already said. It was the perception, or what that Nate was receiving, of very different perceptions of the state of the building. I think a lot of steps were about really communicating what is the actual state of the building as opposed to perceptions of the building. And we have a lot of that information available based on the capital plan, improvements that have been made, the things that probably remain still to be done, and then being able to try to steps to be taken or to communicate that clearly by really involving the community. Because, you know, my memory back in 2015-16 is there was a big push in the bond vote to really explain at that point in time how much work needed to be done on the building. And there was a lot of community involvement and invitations to the building as part of that process. And I feel like in certain ways, the community hasn't really been updated in a significant way in terms of all the work that's been done on the building, through all the capital investment, to the ongoing budget. That the board heard the community and said, you need to fix the building and you need to do it within a budget. And we're not comfortable, obviously, doing a bond vote. So I think all of those things would be really helpful, really letting the community know.
Yeah, I was with Sandy and Liz and Krista. Another thing I thought, and maybe you mentioned it, Liz, and I didn't hear it, but you know, hearing from faculty and staff within the building, what do they have other needs? Do they have other areas that they'd like to see improvement? What we saw tonight, you know, it's great that those systems are up to date, but you know, those are 20th century systems and we live in the 21st century. So like, you know, are there still needs? I'd love to hear from faculty. Like, are there still needs so we can really meet the student needs that they're seeing here in 2021? And I think that'd be important to share out. And another piece that Brad brought up in regards to during the bond process is some of those ticket items on that big ask. You know, in a sense, weren't pie in the sky, but it's like resurfacing the track and moving, you know, the wood shop and the metal shop down to the first floor, and some of those things that, you know, it seemed like they were wants, but maybe they weren't needs. And just addressing that too, like, hey, like that would have been great, but it's still going really well, even in maybe the current set, or it's not. I don't know. But I just think communicating that, because there is the public perception. Nate's right. Like, I mean, when I moved here in 2019, I mean, that was the thing people said, like, Mount Abe is, you know, sort of needs some help. And I think those folks at that time, the bond vote was still pretty fresh. And Kristen said, like, a lot of people haven't been in the building for almost 2 years now, and a lot has happened in 2 years. And so, is there a better way to showcase that?
So I was on the merger committee, but I'd just like to go to you know, the building perception for just a second. The second meeting I was in talked about getting people into the building, and I think you know, we used to do that a lot. I've taught computer courses in this building, and people were swimming in the building, and men's basketball league in the building. We need to have functions and plays, of course, and other, but the more we can get adults in the building, not just to take a tour, but to participate in events in the building, they will get to see the condition of the building, the improvements that have been made, and they see value in the building. You come to the building for an adult ed course and you go home having learned something. And so I think that's a great part of what I heard about communication about the facility is finding ways to get adults in the building. The only thing I have to add in the merger, I think Sarah and Kevin did a great job, is that the consultant presented 3 options for us. Do nothing, no merger, which it doesn't really affect what Nate's process is. The second is a unified district where there's one school board, one superintendent, and that superintendent and board run all grades, run all the elementary schools in all the towns and middle school and high school in a unified fashion. And that substantially affects or intersects with what the proposals Nate's dealing with. So that's got to be a concern that he's having, what's going on. And then the third is a return to the supervisor union process where, and I think it was said earlier that our perception is, or our thinking is that the merger committee is more about creating a viable high school, cost-effective viable high school, and not so much about the elementary schools. So if we went to a supervisory union where Mount Abe district would run the elementary schools and the Virginia district would run their elementary schools, and then other towns like Lincoln and Ripton might join this supervisory union. And then have a union high school. So in that case, that affects Nate's work in yet a different way. So those have to be Nate's concerns in terms of what direction the merger study committee is going.
Yeah, I was also with Dave and Sarah and Kevin on the merger study group, and I think they pretty much covered it. So I'm the fourth person to say something, but I'm not sure I have much to add. I think generally the concern is that the study committee process is really not clearly understood by the community, and I suspect that is the genesis of Nate's concern. Just speaking from the few meetings that we've had so far, I've been struck that the study committee's mandate is extremely broad. And the committee itself, I don't think has really been able to wrap its collective head around that. And trying to ascertain what inputs the committee needs in order to come up with some sort of proposal that would fall somewhere in the range of further collaboration between the two communities to a complete merger. So I think there's just a lot of unknowns, and I think that's the challenge that we face. And as Kevin said, we really weren't able to get to the second part of the charge tonight, to kind of come up with some strategies to address those perceptions.
I was the last member of the authority group, and I guess my general perception is that outside of school closing, we still don't know who has authority and why. Because there's so many sub-tiers of each question, because there can be, myriad situations in which someone would need to make a decision, and it's unclear who would make that decision and why that decision would be on that person's shoulders. And I think there's some legal lines that were brought up that would help us sort of parse that out. But I think there's still a lot of questions in the authority realm that would certainly concern us, but also Nate in terms of moving forward with any of the work he's doing. Wow. We get into a lot of
different points, but I think we do have a sort of common understanding. I think we all sort of understand that we can do something about the Mount A piece right now. I think, I didn't hear anybody who didn't grasp that piece where we can do something to improve that piece right now. I think the other stuff, I think we need more clarity, more conversation. I think it'll have to be carefully planned, but I think we can get to work through the rocky parts of the conversation. But maybe we should begin at our next meeting. Maybe we can talk about like the plan to get the word out about Mount A, how we can navigate that and get that on the way, and continue to talk through and get to another level where we maybe can get in a little deeper on this other stuff. It feels a bit similar to like what we have done in negotiating, where we start with we call it the low hanging fruit. And it seems like the Mount A piece might be some of the low hanging fruit, and then we can step into tackling the stuff that's a little harder. If everybody's still on board with that. I know some people are at different stages in this where they really feel like they know what we need to do, and there are others of us that are not. So we just gotta all come to a place where we can at least have this, and not, you know, the I can't live with this piece. So it's late, and I don't think that we should try to do any more tonight, but I think we can work on the Mount A piece and continue the discussion on the other two topics and keep building on this work. We did find some common ground by trying this, and let's keep going.
Can I offer one update on the Mount A? It just so happens that our very own Sean Kimball has been working with our very own Shannon Wharton to produce a video highlighting a lot of the things you saw tonight. So we'll have a video ready to go very soon.
That was the fastest action we've ever taken. That's amazing.
So we'll have that to share soon to think about how to utilize that, how to use that in terms of getting the word out. So.
I'm just, I can't recall, John, if we made a plan to have a facilities planning meeting in addition to our board meetings every month, but maybe we can reconfirm our interest in doing that. And I would advocate for us to really focus in, like we did tonight, on just that, you know, those topics and not other board work, and keep our board meeting for the other work. And I also really liked I think having a protocol to work through that was incredibly helpful. So
thanks for that idea and letting us. Patrick and Krista we work together to kind of get each other all up to speed on how it would work and play it out. So thank you both. Yes.
I mean, I find myself a little, disheartened by the fact that, we have sort of the, community's dysfunction over what is happening in this room and in the study committee room. So I would like to see us focus in future meetings on figuring out if there's a way to, sort of clear our plate of all of these distractions so that we can work through the Levinson process and the study committee process, to their logical conclusions, without having to be worried about, the status of Lincoln's withdrawal or the prospect of Sarksborough withdrawing from the district. I mean, I think they're huge. They're big distractions. I think they compromise the work that we can do as a committee, because as long as our constituents, our clients, so to speak, and using the governance language that we talked about at the retreat, as long as they're focusing on for example, the voting issue, they're not going to hear a lot of the messaging that, from this committee about the value of, the Levinson proposals or the recommendations of the study committee. It's above my pay grade. I don't know how to get that onto this agenda, how to make that a a priority for this group, but that is something that I think would be beneficial, not only for our coming to a successful conclusion in the next 6 months or a year or whatever, but also, being responsive to our constituents. So I'm open to suggestions from, because again, I'm not sure how to move that forward.
Sorry, Brad, so are you saying, you suggest that we take action on that question we considered tonight, which was who has the authority to do what? That we focus solely on that.
Well, I'd like to put that behind us if we could.
Right.
Rather than just stringing it out, because it's a distraction, and as I said, I think it compromises the other things that we're trying to accomplish.
So I guess if I could just add, so I just would add that from my perspective, I think this process showed that we're not, as a board, ready to do that.
That may be, but,
I mean, we had a conversation at our last meeting that ended up just in discussion, and we had a conversation tonight. So I guess I feel like we're trying to do that, but we haven't yet been able to come out with an action, which I guess is that's the crux of it. So I would say I don't think we're avoiding it. I think we're not ready to do it. I mean, it hasn't happened yet for a reason, I think.
no, I'm not saying it has to be put on the agenda for September 28th or anything. I just want, I think that we have to, move with some deliberate speed to resolve the authority issues that Steve raises, for example.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement. I guess I'm saying I feel like what we're doing is trying to get there, but maybe it's not a process that you feel like is effective or working. I don't know. I guess I feel like we're trying different ways to get us there. Popcorn conversation didn't really do it last meeting. This protocol didn't do it, so I don't know what will. Sandy.
I think maybe another step, a lot of these issues are very legal. I mean, they really are. And so, we did do, consultation with our board attorney. We had the one that was public, the one that was executive session. I think we at that time didn't feel like we needed to resolve the question. We were hoping this process would get us where we needed to go in making these tough decisions about the school, but it keeps popping up. And so I wonder if we need that type of additional session to really ask some hard questions that might give board members the clarity they need, that they can either vote yes or no on an action. Because at some point, it's really more about, does the majority of the board feel they can take action? And I feel like, I may be a lawyer and I have my various opinions, but that's just me looking at it like anyone else with just more experience. But I think our board lawyer, we need to really be able to press further on these issues now that it keeps popping up, and then see if we can then feel we have enough information to take action. Because I think we gathered all the facts and the beliefs, but now it's a matter of how do we apply that to the law, to the articles, kind of thing. And it's very legal. And I just feel like to make a decision that it would be helpful. It would be helpful for me.
Yeah, I just, I guess to Krista, to your point, and Brad, your point too, I agree with both of you, but I also realize that, I've got the letter from the Starksboro Select Board in front of me, and, Starksboro will follow suit and post a vote to withdraw from the district. Is the last line of that. I think time is of the essence. And even if we look at Nate's timeline, at some point, we're going to have clarity, because it could be a proposal where schools look a little different. And if we don't, I think, set ourselves up before December, before we sit down and make a vote, that's already too late, in my opinion. And I just want to be thoughtful, timing. I get we're not there. That's fine, but not being there tonight could have consequences, unfortunately.
I struggle with this. I am concerned that the board, there's a lot of differing opinions and a lot of different strategies out there. I would hate to see the board come up with what may be the solution, anticipating Nate's results that we ultimately debate, and find out that A, we didn't need to make that decision because of his recommendations, or B, we made a decision that hampers us to carry out his recommendations. So I'm very concerned about, and I know Stark Squirrel's like rattling the drum, and it's their positioning as well, but I'm not, it bothers me that we don't know what how we're gonna impact, because we haven't really got to the point that we're looking at all that information and driving towards a conclusion.
I mean, my understanding that Nate wasn't gonna have a recommendation, but we were gonna see stuff that we could then analyze and make, right? So he's not gonna have a recommendation, I don't think.
Yeah, so you're right. We will
Right.
debate his options, but nonetheless, we will have to come to a conclusion of our own.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It's not his recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be great if we all felt comfortable to make some sort of statement about, okay, the town does this and the board does this. I guess what I'm just struggling with is how do we get to that majority vote where we all agree? So I totally, I think it's important. I think Nate raised it as a concern with us that you guys got to, this is an issue of concern in the community that it would be great if you could figure out. I guess I just want us to acknowledge that that's what we're trying to do. I'm not sure how else to do it. It could be that the only thing we talk about next time, perhaps, like we had 3 tonight, maybe to your point, Brad, maybe that's the only one we talk about next time, and maybe that will get us closer. And that would be great, and maybe we find another way to, keep chipping away at it. I think it's not that we don't all recognize this is really important. I think we all recognize that it's really hard. It's just, if it were easy, we would have figured it out right away.
That makes me rethink a little bit of what I said to some extent, because what I forget is that it's like, which is the cart, which is the horse, which goes first, which doesn't. You can put them in either position. So for example, we don't know what we're going to be getting, and we're waiting, I think, for good reason, for what the draft is and what the possible proposals are. And they in and of themselves may help us answer a lot of the questions that we're asking. So I think we all are just waiting for information. And part of that is, I guess I'm realizing I need to be patient and wait to let this process that we started and put so much time into get to where it needs to be. And I'm hoping it has clarity. I do understand, and I completely get where different communities are feeling on edge because they're also waiting. And so it's, we're also sort of waiting for the substance, and hopefully it's my hope that this process, there will become more clarity. And in the meantime, I do understand that people may not feel, I have my concerns as well, just wondering about what ultimately can be coming down the pipe, but I feel in good faith that people are really trying to do what needs to be done. And so in that respect, sometimes we may not have to answer certain questions depending on what the proposals are. We may find that people are much more in consensus than we think, but we don't know that yet. So I'm willing to still work with this process. But I appreciate the need. I wish there was more clarity on those other things, and wishing it doesn't mean that, it can happen, but I'm obviously part of this board and feel like we need to keep doing that process.
And I think maybe next time we could talk about what is the definition of repurposing, and are there, you know, we had two things we were talking about today. I think that that's the murkiest thing, and we could punch at that a little bit, and I mean, that's really the crux of it, right?
I'm feeling really extraordinarily frustrated. I appreciate wanting to get the consensus. I think that should be the guiding light of every board. But if we wait around to get the consensus on this, might be a while. Maybe we should just have a vote. You know, if in the end, if we accept the superintendent's plan, do we believe that we can do that without a vote in the town? All right, let's just vote on that. And we'll see how many board members think that we can go ahead and do that and ignore whatever concerns other towns may have. We have that power and we're going to do it. On the other hand, if our concerns are great enough that if we do choose to go through with the superintendent's proposal, we intend to involve, have a vote, consult with members of those of the communities that we're serving. And let's say that. Let's give the people in our surrounding communities a level of comfort about what the intention of this board is, instead of dithering meeting after meeting after meeting.
I also just want to say it's been a wonderful summer, and there has been many people that have given me positive feedback. They're sometimes intimidated to come forward and say, this is another idea I have, or this is something else that the building could be used for, or I just want my kid to have the most accessing the programs. I don't mind at all if they go to school with somebody from another town. I've heard that straight along. And I don't want anybody to think for a minute that we're, just because maybe we have a different point of view on it, that means that we're not listening to people in our communities, that we're not hearing what parents want, that we're not listening to what students need. Like, that's not a fair assumption, you know? So just because I just want to put it out there that it's you know, I don't know. I just felt like it can be intimidating to speak up in front and support something when there's a lot of pressure against it, you know, and like, you know, maybe like, so I just want to say that there are absolutely community members that are in support of change for sure. Like that's not, that exists out there as well. So reaching out to them, hearing from them will be important. So I definitely want to do this regardless in consultation with our community. But I don't know. I don't.
Kristen? And I don't think it's an either or situation, and we're doing that. We're doing what we should in the bargaining that we learned about we shouldn't do. So if we could, it's not, or the ultimate process isn't either or, and how can we? It really isn't. It's not. I guess on the, and again, we need to define what repurposing is in order to continue, I think. So if we could, because what would we be voting on? That you can vote on repurposing, but what is repurposing, right? Is that what would we even be like allowing towns to do or whatever? I mean, what kind of motion would we even make if we don't define it better? And because some of us might be willing to retain some of that for grade configurations, but for the innovation centers, maybe we wouldn't all agree. I don't know. And so we haven't even defined what we would be voting for. Exactly, right? You see what I'm saying? So I couldn't vote if people just said repurposing, because what does that mean? I think we need to parse that apart maybe at the next meeting. Again, I'm repeating myself, but again, I think that's important.
All right, well, thanks for hanging on, and it's much later than we should have been, but it's important work, and it's what we need to do. So we don't need another executive session. Is there any public comment at this time? Nancy? Nancy.
It's been so interesting and helpful to hear the conversations tonight. They're really important conversations. That's what I really want you to know is that I can't say I speak for my town, but I think that generally speaking, Starksboro is desperately wanting assurances that you're on our side and on the side of what we think is best for kids too. And we desperately like to be working with you in solving this problem. And I can really imagine you're agreeing with each other on some assurances that would enable us to feel like we could work together rather than at cross purposes. I almost have the words for them. And from the conversations I heard tonight, it wouldn't be hard to come to agreement on resolutions along those lines. And I just want to say, I desperately hope that you will work on coming to that agreement as soon as possible, because the last thing we want to do is initiate a withdrawal process. But without those assurances, we do feel backed into a corner. And that isn't where we want to be with the board. We'd much prefer to be working with you, because I think together we have the potential to find some really great solutions that would satisfy us all. And that won't be possible if we're not working together. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay. Chris, do you have the meeting evaluation on it?
What is the level of engagement of all board members, high or low?
Aye.
Is the agenda followed, yes or no?
Yeah.
Any comments?
Interesting process for whatever that item was.
Discussion item?
Discussion item.
Okay, stop protocol.
Great tour, public seat.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board, yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments? Okay. Chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process, yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Could you know, I thought the jigsaw was exceptional in those regards tonight. Jig, is that what you call it, Don? Jigsaw
Yes.
exercise? I just really appreciate it.
Back to the chair. What went well with the meeting?
You better write the tour down.
suggestions for ways to improve future meetings? I think clarifying if we have to fill a board position somehow differently. I mean, yeah, but I mean, in the future.
I actually liked the process tonight. I thought that we came to the right conclusion.
Anything else? Right. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I make a motion to adjourn.
Claire Carol, Andrew seconding. All those in favor of adjourning at 9:52, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.